Welcome to this latest instalment of The Illusion of Inclusion in the Olympic Games. My name is Christopher Humphrey and I am a sports science student from the University of Leeds. This podcast, titled Squash, The Pursuit for Olympic Inclusion, will discuss the long and painful journey that squash has made in the attempt to gain status as an Olympic sport, talking about the recent rejected applications for the 2012 and 2016 Games and what lies for the future of squash in the Olympics. Squash originated in Harrow School in 1890, when pupils discovered that when punctured, a racket's ball squashed on impact, producing a variety of new shots, creating a more challenging game for the athlete. Squash was first played at competitive level in England in 1920, when the first professional championship was held. Squash has come a long way since then, being played in more than 150 countries by over 20 million people. Squash is now governed by the World Squash Federation, or WSF, who oversee the sport, with prize money for events ranging up to £250,000 at the highest elite levels. Following a detailed process for the IOC in 2005, two sports, baseball and softball, were voted off the Olympic programme for 2012. 5 non-Olympic sports, squash, golf, roller sports, karate and rugby sevens, applied, with squash and karate being selected as the two sports that could potentially be chosen to join the Olympic programme for 2012. However, a two-thirds majority was needed for a sport to become an Olympic sport, and with neither squash or karate achieving this, they were not included for London 2012. After this disappointing rejection, squash were once again on the shortlist for the sports competing to be chosen to gain Olympic status for 2016, this time with just a majority vote being needed for an Olympic sport recognition due to changes in the Olympic Charter. For the 2016 Olympic bid, the squash created a campaign around 7 key statements, with these being: squash is relevant for today as the world's healthiest, most exciting sport. Squash is a popular, accessible sport played the world over. The game is well organised to take advantage of inclusion in the Olympic Games. An Olympic medal will be the sport's highest honour. Squash's top athletes will definitely compete. Squash can take the Olympic Games into new markets. And the impact of squash on the Olympic Games will be high impact at a low cost. As can be seen in these next clips, squash's top athletes were clearly behind the bid.
It'd mean everything to me to win an Olympic gold medal.
Winning an Olympic gold medal would be the pinnacle of my career.
It would be great to be part in the Olympic.
To have squash in the Olympics is just going to be the ultimate thing to have.
And the WSF president was quoted saying, "The entire sport of squash is united behind the bid for inclusion in the Olympic Games. The professional tours would change their schedules in Olympic years to ensure that the Olympic Games would be in its rightful place at the very pinnacle of the sporting achievement possible, showing that the sport is willing to be flexible to suit the needs of the Olympic Games." Squash made exciting new changes, such as movable glass courts that could be placed into interesting venues with 360-degree views for the spectators. However, all the optimism and positivity that squash showed towards the bid for 2016 was crushed when it was announced that golf and rugby sevens would take the 2 places available for the 2016 Games. The WSF president, Ramashodan, came out after the rejection and said, "I believe that squash has come a long way in the last 4 years, not just in order to try and gain Olympic inclusion, but for the benefit of the sport as a whole. We have invested in development and listened to players at all levels in order to help progress the sport. I believe that through this we have been able to take squash to a new level. Although we will not see the dream of being part of the Olympic Games for 2016, we will continue to improve the sport whenever possible and will not give up on the belief that squash is deserving of and ready for Olympic status." A lot of the squash community are upset with the rejection, with examples of badminton's Gail Ems and Nathan Robertson becoming household names since their bronze medal in Athens 2004, showing how a sport such as squash can gain from Olympic inclusion. And with the current male number 1 coming from England, this shows the potential for a gold medal and even greater success in the sport. Although it was hard to accept, it was suggested that squash already knew its fate before the decision was announced, with George Miras stating how he had been told by experienced ex-journalists that the decision was already made. This was due to powerful IOC members coming out and publicly backing the inclusion of rugby and golf. They believed that the potential for bringing in spectators, sponsorship and TV for these 2 commercial sports was much bigger than for squash, with the IOC making the logical decision for its own benefit at the expense of squash. For the meantime, WSF will have to make plans for squash without the Olympic dream. However, with backing from men such as businessman Zaid Al-Turki, talking about his passion for the future of squash and the money he will invest to see it grow, the future of squash looks a bright one. The next story of inclusion to be discussed in this series will be learning difficulties in the Paralympic Games.